Some of the largest Amazon brands didn't fail because of suspensions, lawsuits, bad products, account health rating. Companies like Caspian, PharmaPax, Thrasio, and many others, huge aggregators, collapsed because of cash flow issues, even though a lot of them actually their sales were growing and they were profitable. I'm Jasim Eisa, CEO and founder of Voadera. We've generated hundreds of millions of dollars on sales on online marketplaces like Amazon. And just last year, we purchased over $40 million in inventory and grew our partners 35% year over year without taking on any debt. In this video, I'm going to cover why cash flow matters more than revenue or profit on Amazon especially, the core buckets that actually improve it, and the six exact tactics we use to improve cash flow to help us scale. Why is cash flow so important, especially for brands selling on Amazon? Sadly, Amazon can actually be one of the worst platforms for cash flow wise if you don't understand it appropriately. Well, the first reason is general, applies to all inventory-based businesses. Basically, in inventory-based business, you need physical assets to sell, unlike service businesses or coaching businesses or info. Like if you own a barbershop, you don't have cash flow problems. Hopefully, you're just cutting hair. You don't need physical assets to sell. Inventory businesses, you're actually selling a physical good that you have to purchase, manufacture, etc., and that requires funding and cash. So that's the first generic reason. The second issue is Amazon's payment terms absolutely suck. They're making it even worse later this month. I'll attach a picture you can see over here. But basically, Amazon's payment terms specifically are delivery date plus 7 days is when they pay you. So not only do you have to send it to, you have to produce it, you're still not getting paid. You have to send it to an Amazon facility, you're still not getting paid. You have to sell it, you're still not getting paid. Yeah, 7 days after delivery, you might get paid, but then you still have to wait for your payment cycle to actualize it. So Amazon pays every 2 weeks. So let's just assume you're selling a product on Monday, right? Then Wednesday it arrives to customer, let's just say 2-day prime shipping. A week later, Amazon releases the funds into your account, but then let's say you're getting paid not that Friday, the Friday after. So let's just say you started on Monday was when you sold it. Let's say Wednesday it arrives, so that's 2 days, another week, right? So it's adding 7 days, so now you have a total of 9 days. That's when Amazon releases the funds. But let's say you're on a 2-week payment cycle, it's every other Friday. So let's say it's not that Friday, the Friday after, so that's almost another 10 days. So you're talking 19 days after sale is when you can actualize those funds. So unlike other marketplaces where you can get paid immediately after sale, or unlike other retailers that actually pay you maybe net 30 or 60 or 90, they pay you once they consume the inventory. It doesn't matter whether they sell it or not. Amazon is paying you net 21 or whatever the number was, I forgot it, post selling the inventory. So that just shows you how bad it is. It's very, very aggressive. So you have to be very careful as you plan. And never mind if you're growing, how long does it take to fund that inventory again? You have to make larger POs and larger and larger. And we've seen so many brands run into this issue. One brand actually we're working with, they were literally about to go out of business because this was one issue. They couldn't fund their upcoming PO. They couldn't fund their upcoming, their ads. They paid for billboards in Times Square and whatever. They were selling, like they grew 50% year over year. Last year they sold 1.8 million. Their P&L was technically 300 to 400 grand. But it didn't matter because they already spent that on inventory. They had horrible payment terms. They had all this kind of stuff that I'll talk about later at the end of this video, that they were literally at risk of running out of business and ruining their entire brand that they built for the last 3 or 4 years because they couldn't fund an upcoming PO and they had debt of marketing that they were basically going to bankrupt their business. So that just shows you how severe things can get and how aggressive it is with Amazon. Let's mention the general buckets used to improve cash flow. Once we go over these, I'll mention the specific levers, the actual tactics that we use to specifically improve our situation. So let's go over high level and then we'll mention ours specifically. So the first one is cash timing. This has to do with also a metric known as cash conversion cycle, which we track rigorously. It's basically, in general terms, you can look up on Google to understand it more thoroughly, even ask ChatGPT. But basically it's the days from when you paid for something until the days you get cash for it. So let's say you paid for a deposit, it takes 60 days to produce, and then 60 days producing, it takes another 3 months to get to Amazon, or let's say 2 months to get to Amazon, and then you sell it, and then Amazon takes 21 days to pay you. Let's just say that's 5 months. That's the cash conversion cycle. So how quickly do you turn cash around? The key to this is you want to pay for your items as late as possible. You want to make your AP, accounts payable, as slow and as long as possible, and your accounts receivable as quick and as short as possible. So you want to turn inventory quickly. You want to be able to consolidate a lot of things. The second one has to do with cash efficiency. So how efficient is your business? How much capital does it require? and how quickly is it, basically how consuming capital intensive is that business, so working capital. So is your item cost a lot and sell very infrequently, or does it cost very little and sell very often? Because that's a much healthier cash efficiency, that you want it to be as cheap as possible, the cost to sale ratio as big as possible, and to be turning over as fast as possible, obviously. The third one is controlling your reinvestment. So this is where you're specifically timing, like we said, you're not investing in a long tail. Like one brand, for example, they were in a cash crunch. We partnered up with them. Like even the partner mentioned earlier, we thankfully partnered up with them. We outlined a cash flow plan. We strategically helped fund them. And we're working on, hopefully this year, we're projecting 2.5 million for the 1 million brand I mentioned earlier. But even for other brand that we're working with right now, they're our partners, they're a cash flow issue. They're doing around 3 to 4 million a year. Thankfully, we grew them from almost 20% the year before, but they wanted to invest in DSP, and they couldn't even barely fund the inventory to get the inventory. So like DSP is long tail investment. Right now, we need to focus on, we're already growing fairly good. Your cash flow can barely afford to invest in the current stuff, the highest margin producing ads that are short term and quick. So why invest in something else? And that's where a lot of brands, they just, okay, if the ROAS is good, spend as much as you can. That's the case if your cash flow can afford it, but you have to look at your reinvestments. Can you afford this? Can you afford a product launch? How much is the product launch? And that has to do with the fourth point basically here, is to be able to forecast and budget and plan weekly. You're looking at your cash flow statements, what's going out, what's coming in, when is a payment due? All that kind of stuff is try to prolong it again, see what you can afford to come in now, how much ads can you afford the long-term ads? Can you only need the short-term ads? All that kind of stuff. And the fifth one is one that we actually personally avoid for religious purposes. I'm an Orthodox Muslim, so we don't get near this one, but it's basically taking loans, and specifically interest rate loans. So within the e-commerce space, you can hear stuff as ABLs, asset-based lending. So they take a loan against your current inventory. Another common term is line of credit. You get this from banks. Another one is obviously the worst if you're doing it from a credit card, not paying it. And that's what very silly, obviously 20% APY or whatever. But that's what a lot of these brands that we mentioned earlier that went out of business, they had so much debt, the interest was accumulated. So it's very risky, very dangerous, and also doesn't technically improves cash flow, improves financial cash flow. Operating cash flow is not improved. So it's more about liquidity than actually improving the fundamentals of the business. The rest actually improve the fundamentals and the health of the business. This one is a short-term cash injection on an as-needed basis. We've seen people obviously make good of it, especially during SB times when interest rates were low. But we, again, for religious purposes, we do our best to avoid them. So for avoiding interest, what are the 6 specific tactics we use to improve cash flow? The first one is negotiating better payment terms with suppliers. We have them sign up for something called Sinosure. It's SINOSURE. You can go read about it, but it's a Chinese program that funds factories, I think, shipping to the US. So they give them actually loans. It's a government program. And we were able to negotiate a lot of our vendors from having us pay a deposit on when the products are made of the whole 100% to all the way now doing net 30, net 45, and net 60. It took us a while. We had to meet them in person. There was negotiation. I made actually a video on this and slashing inventory cogs later at the end of this video. I'll attach it. But that was a huge lift for us in terms of payment terms. And the second one, actually also related to payment terms, was consolidating our credit cards. So we had 4 or 5 different credit card vendors, I think Chase, American Express, Discovery. What we did is we did an RFP, so request for proposal, we went to all of them, and we actually went to another one that we knew. And we said, we want to consolidate all of our payment terms, but we want great payment terms. We're going to send all of this funding to you. We want longer payment terms. So instead of the casual 30, we'd get maybe a 60-day payment term. We also wanted the bigger budget, because what happened is we had a 300K limit. So whenever we use the 300K, we would basically have to repay it. So we're really not getting 30-day payment terms, because one weekend we use the 300K, we have to pay it again. So we got longer payment terms, we got better cashback rates, we got a bigger amount because we consolidated and we made them bid each other out. And then also one thing that we haven't done this a lot, but we can, because we want to make sure our margins are healthy. We can use vendors like Million Plastic. Again, we haven't used them, I'm not sponsoring them, but they could allow you to pay with credit cards even with the vendor you're paying to doesn't accept them. They only want ACH and wires. You can use them to pay with the credit card to get that back. So that's, again, using credit cards to leverage payment terms and getting better, so helping the cash conversion cycle and the timing to get a more efficient cash conversion cycle and longer AP accounts payables. The third one we've done is strategic capital private investment network. So we've partnered up with adjacent businesses that have different timing or cycles on us. So for example, we're an e-com business, we have Q4 demand heavy, so in Q3 we need money, perhaps to prep for that or during Q4. So what we've done is, for example, let's say we're working with a roofer, they need in Q2, they're selling a lot of homes then, so they help give us a loan interest free, and for example, let's say $1 million in Q3, we give them a loan in Q1 for $1 million, just as an example, and they use that, we trade money back and forth. So we built a portfolio or a network of people that have adjacent businesses that we loan money back and forth to during times of need or demand, and this is basically one of the things that's been really helpful. So the next one is unit economics and category selection. We're now targeting specific categories and partnering with categories that have a better, healthier ratio for this specific working capital. So one example is skincare brand that we partnered up with. Basically, they do eye patches, all this kind of stuff. And we've been able to grow them very efficiently, spend on ads, but the cost, for example, is $2 or $3 and we're selling it for $30, right? So there's already the unit economics propel you for a specific healthy ratio. And when we're developing products, right, we're specifically targeting niches or products that require less working capital, more efficient, but we're also still working the inefficient ones. We have higher margin requirements. So we're planning it going into that. So we also have very heavy items that sell less frequently, right? But we're going into that with that mentality, so we understand we have higher margin requirements. The second two are related to inventory. The last two, sorry, are related to inventory discipline. The first one is the 100-day rule that we have. So we don't want more than 100 days on anything of inventory. If it's longer than 100 days in stock, we don't run into sunk cost fallacy. We start liquidating aggressively. We make sure that we're ordering only up to 100 days as needed. Ideally, we're much less. We're averaging better than that, but it's maximum 100 days. And the second one is drip feeding and consistent replenishments and POs rather than bulk ordering. We were ordering once a month. Now we're ordering once a week. Our volume supports that. We're being more efficient. We're also using that to optimize for supply chain. And this is kind of a side point, but we're shrinking the supply chain row. So this is actually, you could add as a bonus point, but instead of, before it used to take us 3-4 months to inbound from, let's say, China to Amazon FC, now we're 2 months. So that 2 months is a shorter cash flow period, faster sales cycle, more efficient inventory turnover, better cash conversion cycle, etc. All that kind of stuff. So putting all those components together, replenishing it quickly, have helped us improve our cash flow dramatically.